Okay, let's try this again. So, I cooling down from Arcane, right? I'm recording this on Friday before the new act drops. I was cooling down from Arcane, and I was like, okay, I just wanna watch some casual Arcane stuff, League of Legends things. This is how like disengage my brain from all of the everything that's happening inside of it in the aftermath of Act 1. And I was like, oh, Film Theory uploaded a video about Arcane, a theory thing. I was like, that'll be fun, that'll be casual. Like, usually theory channels is like, hey, it's a little silly, it's a little bit like, oh, we're making up some silly stuff, but it's like, and then I watched it, and it was like, it was bad. It was not good, and that whole reaction video ended up being a lot more negative than I wanted. I just wanted to have fun, I just wanted to have a nice time. So this time, we're still cooling down. I'm still just trying to distract myself until the next round of Arcane hits me like a meteor that destroyed the dinosaurs. So this time I've chosen a video which I know I will greatly enjoy, which I know will put like the hot breath of life and pleasure and fun into me, and where I can just kind of sit here and gush and be happy and add context and say nice things and like, oh, fun fact about this character and things, because subjectively have done a redesign of Shyvana. Not for the first time they've played around with this. Subjectively has also done a bunch of like really interesting champion reworks. Their rework of Zyra is like, God, I think that's a definitive version of the character, actually. I fucking wish that Bloody Riot would bite the bullet and just adopt that as the official look for Shyvana. Why does the arm on my model do that with my character? Oh, right, I changed some of the settings about arm rotation. Oh, well, I'll deal with that later. It looks a little awkward right now. You'll have to live with it. Who cares? What was I saying? Right, subjectively, I ran out of my ADHD medication today. So I've only just picked up a new prescription. I've just taken it, but it hasn't kicked in yet. I'm kind of all over the place. Shyvana, subjectively, is like some fantastic artists that like take the craft of character design seriously and like dive deep into trying to make the character fit the brief of what the story that the character is supposed to tell is, which is one of my great pleasures. Like, that's one of the major complaints I have with League of Legends character design, is that oftentimes there are commercial concerns that override the need for craft in character storytelling that really quite annoy me. It also, like, there's also other reasons why League of Legends character design is the way it is, but because fan artists don't have to worry about the technical details of how can this be implemented into the game and stuff like that, we can just kind of go ham on it, and subjectively are some of the best to ever do it. So let's just enjoy this. Let's just have a good time.
I'm an illustrator.
Yes, you
What
are.
I do for a living. People pay me to draw things, and then I do. Pretty
You should, if you have the money, by the way. Motherfucker can draw anything for you.
straightforward stuff. Some people might envy my power to bring to life visuals that they could only imagine, but
Yes, I do. I'm not a terrible illustrator, but I am more of a cartoonist than anything.
trust me when I say that with great power comes great responsibility. I'm not only compelled to draw, I'm obliged to. It is my duty to right the wrongs of the world of illustration wherever they may lie. Pretentious? Perhaps. Entitled? Sure sounds like it. A bit too big for my britches? Well, we'll just have to see.
Well, that's being a YouTuber. It's like me over here having all of my opinions about character design. Yeah, no, same boat, buddy. Same hat.
Today's topic of conversation will test my assertion that I'm good enough at what I do to tackle a job that a multi-million-dollar game company has not been able to complete for years. I can already hear long-time viewers groaning in unison. Yup. It's time to once again redesign Shyvana.
Yep.
Let me begin by addressing my previous statements wherein I glazed myself better than a Krispy Kreme donut. I know, the audacity, right? What right have I to say that I'm as good at or better than a team of highly experienced illustration professionals? Well, to be honest, I'm probably not. Scratch that, actually, I'm definitely not. But I do believe that well-founded confidence is a trait that we need to see more of in the artist community.
Also, I will say, Riot as a company hires some of the best artists and illustrators on the planet. Like, genuinely, like, yeah, you see the splash arts, you see the stuff they put out officially for Riot, right? Like, that has a certain look, that has a certain commercial nature to it, right? Like, which sometimes can be have my criticism, but like go and follow these artists. Look up their personal work. Look up the stuff that they do on their off time just for themselves for fun. Like, these motherfuckers are like, holy shit, my guys. Like, they are so fucking good at what they do. And one of the things is, like, a company structure like Riot actively makes certain aspects of the art they put out worse by, like, not necessarily by malice or even by incompetence, but just by the sheer virtue of too many cooks in the kitchen. Because, like, nothing goes into League of Legends if it has not been approved by, like, 400 stakeholders in 45 countries, right? Like, there are so many people in the pipelines, in the production lines, so many people who have authority, who have voice, who have, like, some relevant experience or some part of the process that's, like, under their purview that they can comment on and say, hey, how about this? I haven't concerned about that. And the inevitable result of this is essentially, like, it's like putting things in a sander, right? Stuff gets rubbed off of the edges, all the interesting little bits, all the stuff that's a little bit of a risk or a little bit outside of the fold or a little bit outside of the box, all of that gets sort of rubbed off when someone goes, oh, that's a little bit weird and unusual. That's not how we usually do it. Are we sure we want to do that? And it just happens. Like, that's part of the nature of a corporate production process. This happens to all corporate products everywhere, all the time. The extent to which it happens depends on who's the producer, who's in charge of the project, who's holding the strings on the money bag. But this is, like, the nature of this kind of corporate production is there's a lot of cooks in the kitchen. The taste is going to end up being a little bit bland because everyone wants it, like, wants to bring their own perspective to it. Like, it's just the nature of it, right? So this thing about, like, individual artists often can do better than large corporations, not necessarily on the technical merits, right? Like, I could never match, and I don't think I have the money to commission someone who could match Riot's illustrators for technical skill. They are the best of the best. But I have made, like, my own redesign videos, which I will stand by. I have come up with better character designs for a few champions than Riot has. And that's not because I am a special, unique genius who, like, floats on the clouds of creativity high in the realm of ideas, but because I have a substantially larger amount of freedom than their artists and designers and producers do. I can just follow my own idea, commit to a concept, and I don't have to worry about what some stakeholder in another country or an executive or a marketing person or even a cultural sensitivity consultant might have to say about it. This is another aspect of League of Legends character design. It's like, everything that gets put into League of Legends has to be something you can publish without controversy in every single one of the markets where it is published, right? And all kinds of cultural taboos come into that. One of the reasons why League of Legends champions, and this is one of my criticisms of League of Legends champions, especially skins, have a tendency to be so conspicuously clean all the time, even for characters and archetypes where it's like, hang on, this character type should kind of be dirty, right? I think of the Street Demons, the recent skin line, a fairly recent skin line that was all like, these characters are like street artists who are like throwing paint around and vandalizing, like, the shiny city of the Mirror's Edge tomorrow and, like, putting their punk, like, graffiti artist spin on it, and every single one of those characters, like, not a paint stain among them, right? Like, all of them conspicuously clean with their clothes as like fine and neat as though they just came off the rack at the store, right? One of my criticisms of that is, like, that's bad storytelling, because if you're telling a story about these, like, underground punk demon sort of rebels who are, like, roaming around the city, rogue, spraying things, like, have you ever seen a real graffiti artist who, like, goes around actually spraying fucking murals covered in fucking paint? It's an inevitable part of the process. But there are some cultural taboos, there are some cultural, like, conversations and signifiers that exist in certain countries that have, like, a strong negative reaction to the concept of being dirty. Like, that means something as a semiotic signifier to them that it doesn't necessarily mean to us. Like, that's a thing that in some contexts, in some cultures, is seen as much, much more distasteful, much more ugly, much more repulsive, and a big commercial concern. And so that sort of gets implemented across, like, League of Legends aesthetic, that things are kept conspicuously clean so as to be able to be published in those countries and those territories without incident and concern, and to maximize profitability, right? And those are choices that corporations will always make that an individual like me, like subjectively, don't have to make. And that gives us a big edge when it comes to that creativity. We can take more risks, we can go harder, we can, like, commit to more interesting, personal, specific ideas that a corporation often just kind of doesn't really have the option to, or rather the people working for the corporation can do whatever the fuck it wants if it wanted to, but it wants money first and foremost. But we can do stuff that it can't, right, on that level. So yeah, like, and this is my encouragement to you out there right now, by the way. You can do better than Riot. You can do better than Blizzard. You can do better than all of these major corporations because you are an individual artist with freedom from the corporate structure that constrains what design can do under all of these other circumstances. And you can take advantage of that. Like, there's a lot of fucking Overwatch fan art of all of the Overwatch characters that I would consider straight up just better character design than the base character designs because they are constrained by all sorts of technical and corporate limitations. You can do better. I don't think actually that that's particularly arrogant to say. And like, even if you can't do better on a technical level, you can do better on a creative level, on a storytelling level. These things are options that are available to you. Please don't ever forget that. Like, he's doing his intro for the video. This is not really directed at him. He knows he's good. He knows he's good. And he should know he's good because he is good. This is more for you guys. Trying to point at the camera, it has a little bit of trouble reading that gesture.
It's all too commonplace to hear choruses of self-deprecation from both professionals and amateurs in my field. I can't think of anything less constructive to the growth of an artist than constantly feeling like you're not good enough. I'd like everyone watching this video, whether you're an artist or not, to take a moment and really appreciate what it is that you do best. Live in that moment and really feel like you're good enough to do anything, even challenge the art team at Riot Games.
Yes. Please, for the love of God, he is right. Listen to him.
Are you with me? Can you feel the positivity flowing through your veins? Are you ready to join me in one of this channel's longest running traditions? Good, because we're going to need all the optimism we can get for this project. Today, for the, fourth time, we are going to give Shyvana the visual update that she deserves.
That's another thing, by the way. You can just do it multiple times, right? You can do a Shyvana update, and then you can do another one, and another one, and another one as you learn, as you grow better as an artist, as you gain new ideas. You can just do it a million times. Riot can only publish a champion like once per year, and right, or rather, in the sense of like they can only rework like one champion a year, apparently. You can just sit down and do like 1,000 different doodles and go through all of the iterations and do all of the cool shit. Like, oh, this idea. What about that? What about this? Do that.
I can tell that you're excited to get started, and I have something that's going to get you even more hyped up. Today, we're partnering with Sugoi Mart to bring you a delicious new holiday tradition. Everyone likes to celebrate the holidays in their
I think
own
I got an email from
Some
them
people
at
like
one point.
sugary treats, others enjoy a shiny new toy. And if these festive customs resonate with you, then you'll love the Sugoi Mart Advent Calendar. 30 days of treats, collectibles, and merch from your favorite official Japanese brands. Sugoi Mart is like a little authentic Japanese import store delivered right to your door. Check this out, a blind box Pokemon figurine, and a really high quality one at that.
Oh,
Now,
that
let me
does look
touch you
kind of
on a
nice,
big
actually.
Secret. You don't have to wait until any specific holiday to crack this bad boy open. You can use the Sugoi Mart Advent Calendar to count down any 30 days. 30 days till someone's birthday. 30 days from the day you get yours in the mail. Or, if you're a real gamer, you can utilize the secret strategy of opening the whole thing in one day and have yourself your own private holiday celebration. And let me tell you, this thing really has everything you need to get in a festive mood. Oh, hell yeah, they have these awesome Japanese Kit Kats. I've had these before, and it's amazing how good a Kit Kat with a third flavor can be. Okay, these I've never seen before. Cute packaging, though.
Maybe I should have taken that
Oh, they're
sponsorship,
good.
actually.
Where are these? Well, let me just scan this super convenient QR code right here and figure it out. Pandaro cookies, adorable. Butter cookies with a melon flavor. Now, that is something you can only get from an authentic Japanese snack. This little guide is amazing, by the way. They even list any allergens on here. Should probably read that before you eat the cookies, if you have food allergies.
Yeah.
These boxes go fast, unsurprisingly, so if you want to snag one this holiday season, you gotta act now. Something else that's unsurprising is that you can get a 10% discount off of your order using the link in the description and my code, subjectively10. They make amazing gifts, I'm getting one for my sister, and they make an even better self-love treat for yourself. Thank you to Sugoi Mart for sponsoring this video. Now that all of you lovely people know how to get your hands on the good stuff, let's all indulge in our favorite treats as we start discussing the topic of today's video, Shyvana.
So I played through that full ad because I felt like if I'm gonna use his video on my channel for reaction content, probably should just, I've gotten a few sponsorship, like for my main channel, not for this one. This one has not attracted the attention of sponsors yet. I've gotten a few of those like sort of subscription box things from various sort of places, like authentic Japanese, whatever. And I've always resisted taking them because I don't have a good camera to film them with. Like, they want you to do these unboxings, right? And I'm not really great with a camera. I'm really not. I do my little animation things. Like, I can't film it to look that nice. I have a fucking Samsung Galaxy S something or other. I can't make it look like that. I need a vlog camera before I can take these sponsorships. But now I'm kind of like, shit, that actually looks kind of nice. This is not me endorsing the product. I have no experience with it. Just saying, it's a well-filmed ad. Like, good job subjectively on that one. Almost sold me on it.
People know how to get your hands on the good stuff. Let's all indulge in our favorite treats as we start discussing the topic of today's video, Shyvana. Most of you watching this video probably know who Shyvana is already, whether it's from playing League of Legends yourself or from watching other videos of ours that we've done on this channel. For those of you who don't know, I'll sum it up real quick. Shyvana is one of over 150 playable characters from the massively popular PvP game League of Legends. The half-dragon of Demacia, this perplexingly purple fighter was hatched from the egg of an elemental drake. Yes, just like the ones that you fight in the Botside River. She was raised by a mage, and perhaps it was this influence that gave her the physical appearance of a human, at least for a time. When her birth mother returned to reclaim her lost hatchling, Shyvana was forced to embrace her wild side, transforming back into her true form as a powerful dragon in order to protect the man who raised her. She failed, and it wasn't until she encountered the young prince of Demacia, Jarvan IV, that she was able to enact revenge on her bloodthirsty broodmother.
Yeah, so I believe this is still the current version of Shyvana's lore that he's recounting. I'm sure it is. Like, he's gone and checked. She's getting a rework soonish. And I say soon-ish because, like, Riot have said they're working on it. That could mean it shows up in 2 months. That could mean it shows up in 2026. But she's getting one. And they're probably going to change some details of her story around. It used to be, like, well, she's had, like many champions, she's had a few lore states, right? Like, but she was... I'm bringing this up because Shyvana was originally designed to, like, function with her original lore, right? And in her original context inside of League of Legends. And in her original lore, as I recall it, I would invite you to remember she had nothing to do with Jarvan. She had really nothing to do with Demacia as such, if I remember correctly. Maybe a little bit. I can't remember. Shit, I need to double check this myself. Hang on. It's really annoying. I can't find the old lore of champions on the new wiki anymore. So I kind of have to go and try and find the... There's a Leaguepedia. The old. Yes, here it is. Yeah. Originally, once upon a time, back in the very first version of her lore, she was born to a simple Demacian farm girl and a celestial dragon father. Left to be raised by her mother, her oddities couldn't be hidden from her community, although she was protected by her family. Once her family perished in a disaster, she was alone for the first time, truly alone. Oh, she did have Jarvan in there. Oh, I didn't remember that. Right, I'm just looking through her various biographies. Interesting. Okay, yeah. So... yeah, current version of the lore is that she was born from a female dragon whose egg was influenced by some kind of outside magical artifact. I think it was that her father stole the egg from her mother, who's Eva. Yes. And because he was the one caring for the egg, raising it, hatching it, that is probably why Shyvana turned out to be a half-dragon. It's not that her dad had sex with a dragon. At least I believe that's the way the biography works. Interesting. I'm just fascinated here because I forgot this part of the lore, that it used to be her father was the dragon, and that she was raised, like, in the old version of Demacia. Right, because in the old version of Demacia, there was not anti-magic bigotry the way that there is now. That was really not a part of the story of the region. But but there was apparently people who were afraid of half-dragon monsters, which, fair enough. And in the very original lore, she never had a conflict with her mother, right? Like, she never had to kill her own parent. She was rescued by Jarvan when her family perished and she was alone, and, like, the villagers were, like, scared of the purple dragon girl, or whatever. That was the very original one. And that's the context in which Shyvana was designed, right? Back when Shyvana was first designed, Demacia did not have its current aesthetic. Its current aesthetic is like all this like sheer white walls and like these oftentimes like very sheer sort of sparse minimalist armors. Jarvan and his personal guard have this much more elaborate armor because of dumb reasons, but won't get into. But Demacia used to be much more generic fantasy kingdom, like much more colorful for one thing, like lots of gold and blue and like red and all sorts of colors were in the Demacian color scheme, including red and orange. And that's part of the reason why Shyvana has a color scheme now that simply doesn't match most of what Demacia looks like in the modern lore today. Just as a point of context so we understand where Shyvana's original design came from.
She was able to rescue Jarvan from certain death, and enamored by her strength and valiant heart, the prince appointed her as one of Demacia's chief protectors. She not only felled her own mother in a conflicting battle that sundered her very soul, she continued to slay her own kind in order to preserve the safety of the kingdom to which she felt she owed a debt of gratitude. She struggles to find acceptance within Demacia's walls, as the city is run by paranoid fascists who seek to snuff out magic wherever they find it. Of course, she'll find no warm welcome waiting for her if she ever decides to return to her own people, with every dragon in Valoran knowing her reputation for slaughtering their kind. She is trapped in a prison of prejudice and unfortunate circumstance, with only a handful of people who bother to show her even a mote of kindness. She believes that Prince Jarvan operates with her best interests in mind, but even though he was the only one to ever show her kindness since her father, the hateful eyes of Demacia's people remind her that she has yet to find a true home. Like the rest of League's vast roster, she has a generous amount of lore tying her into the overarching story of League of Legends and the world of Runeterra. Yup, the same world wherein characters like Vi, Jinx, and Ambessa all struggle to find their place. A world of drama, conflict, hatred, and love. A complex world that demands an equal level of complexity from the visuals that describe it. Surprised that this character and these characters are all part of the same story? Well, that's understandable. And it's because, unlike a majority of the League of Legends cast, Shyvana has been around since long before Riot Games had committed such a sizable amount of focus and labor to building a compelling world for their game.
It should also be said, Shyvana isn't or wasn't part of the same world as the characters in Arcane. As I've harped on about on this channel extensively, the universe of Arcane was originally developed to be entirely its own thing. It was originally developed to be a thing that was like a parallel universe or an alternate version of the main canon, but not directly tied to it. So it was able to do a lot of its own thing, right? So what we might be bringing up in this video here is that Demacia is this, as he's already brought up, is that Demacia is this very bigoted place, like this place that has a lot of anti-magic phobia, because of something called the Rune Wars, which were like a near-apocalyptic war between mages that nearly took out the world. And a bunch of that was used also in the backstory of Piltover and Zaun over in Arcane, back when Arcane was meant to be a separate thing. In the main canon of League of Legends, there was never a sort of, oh, this was a city that was founded to escape the devastation of the Mage Wars or whatever. That was never really part of Piltover and Zaun as regions. That was something that was very much the specific basis of Demacia. And so that element is something like, if you're going, hey, that sounds very similar to the element of anti-magic bias in Piltover and Zaun, this is why.
Not only that, but she has never been updated to match the current standards of both visuals and storytelling. Because League is such an old game, a lot of the characters from its early years have a very different look to them than their newer cast members.
Oh god, the old teaser. The old trailer, I remember this one.
Ranging from the limited team of artists and animators they had working for them at the start, to the growth of the game and the evolution of its visual identity.
That's Nunu and Willem, motherfuckers. Look at his neck! Look at this neck! Oh my god. The character model, to be fair, is designed so that you look down on it from above in sort of a Warcraft 3 perspective, because original League of Legends is very much based on Warcraft 3 aesthetically and in terms of gameplay. But oh my god, the old models. The old ancient models. Oh my god. Once upon a time, everyone looked at this trailer and was like, wow, that looks cool. Well, maybe not everyone. It was kind of cheap even for its time, but still.
Like all good things, League of Legends has changed a lot from 2009.
I just heard that if you haven't played Song of Nunu, you should. It's just a solid, good 3D action platformer, and it just has such lovely character design in it. Tequila Works, the studio that was working on this for Riot Forge, and my sort of through the grapevine information about it is that game had a really troubled production with a bunch of interference, I think from Riot specifically, sort of messing with what Tequila Works wanted to do, which ended with the game coming out in what I would consider a slightly compromised state, but it's still a really good game with a lot of great visual design. Play that game, please. Go and buy it and play it. Tequila Works are shutting down. They have entered insolvency. Because, you know, the games industry is fucking collapsing right now, and it's fucking horrible because they made a fantastic game in Song of Nunu. They sent me a little influencer sort of promotional box. It had this little paper diorama in it that is just one of the most gorgeous, wonderful charm. I gasped when I opened the box with that fucking thing in it. And I apparently I was so nice about it that the artist who was responsible for it like found the video and saw me being so nice, but he contacted me on Instagram to be like, "Oh, you kind of made my day with that." I was like, "Oh, sweet, like that's lovely." It's really, really good. I have it over on my fucking other channel. I'll go and find the video. I'll try to remember to put it in the description. You should see that. You should see the diorama they made for that box because it's really, really good. And go play Song of Nunu. It's pretty cheap, and it's a solid little game that's worth playing if you just want to have a good time with some kids and maybe cry a little bit.
To the present day. The quality of the game's visuals, music, and storytelling have been elevated by a team of artists so talented that they are quite literally setting the bar for the entire video game industry.
This is also a thing that I think is worth remembering when discussing the aesthetic and the artwork of Riot Games. Is like, if you open mobile game stores nowadays, or see a lot of AAA video games come out and you go, oh my god, why does everything just look the same, like with the fucking same aesthetic? Like, part of the reason is why there was a period there, especially during the very, very heights of League of Legends, like ascendancy, that everything was mimicking League of Legends aesthetically. Especially mobile games were trying to cash in on the League of Legends aesthetic a lot. Riot's aesthetic, Riot's like working visual arts aesthetic and the way that has evolved has had a huge influence on the industry. And one of the sort of olive branches I will extend to them is that, like, yes, League of Legends has a very generic video game fantasy aesthetic, but that's in part because they have had a huge hand in defining what is generic video game fantasy aesthetic. Like, over the years that League of Legends has been online, it has pushed a lot on what we expect from generic video game fantasy aesthetic. It kind of comes from here, in the same way that, like, Tolkien kind of invented what we think of as fantasy elves nowadays. Riot and its art style and its internal, like, aesthetic directions have had a huge influence on how fantasy aesthetics in video games have played out today. Also, other things like Blizzard has had a huge influence. Like, it's more complicated than just one company dominating it, but you shouldn't undercount just how influential Riot has been and how many other companies and products have tried to ride their coattails by copying them.
I don't think that people give these artists enough credit.
True.
The general rhetoric amongst fans whenever Riot announces pretty much anything is, boo, this sucks.
Yeah.
But I think that what people are trying to say...
I mean, not that I'm not guilty of that a little bit, but I do try to qualify my criticisms with more than just boo, this sucks sometimes. But accurate call out nonetheless from subjectively.
In this echo chamber is that capitalism sucks, and it smothers creativity out of talented people. Between layoffs, lawsuits, and unapologetic cash grabs, the corporate side of League of Legends is ugly, but unsurprisingly so. However, I mean no disrespect to
the Smolder concept arts.
Come in the line of fire between passionate fans.
Like, I have my Smolder. I think the face on the Smolder, the character, is horrible. I think it looks like a child's face stapled to a sort of like gecko body or something. Like, there's an aesthetic mismatch there that I really don't like. But check out the concept art. Check out, like, the development art behind what they did, like where Smolder came from, and you will see it has nothing to do with whether or not the artists at Riot knew better or could do better or come up with more interesting designs. It's that process I described. It's the too many cooks, right? With Smolder, I'm convinced it's because like they did some of these faces there, and then there was like 5 million stakeholders with different ideas of what is cute and what is most appealing in what market, and like coming in with like feedback and influence, like, oh, we want it this way, we want that way. And the artist who's caught in the middle just trying to average out all of the feedback they get from everywhere until everyone's like equally unhappy with it, right? It's never like when Riot puts out something that's not that great, the first place that I put the blame is never on the artists. Well, except for one of them, but I won't name him because he's moved on anyway.
And a greedy upper management. When I posit the claim that I can do my job better than Riot, I'm not trying to take a dig at the creative team of League of Legends. Riot might be as scummy as any other massive corporation with a bottom line goal of making as much money as possible, but the people they employ to keep their game fresh and relevant are incredibly skilled at what they do.
Ooh.
League of Legends and the art that has made it what it is has been and continues.
Victor Mori, like, again, go to the wiki, look up these artists individually, and just check out the high resolution versions of the splash arts they've made. Just zoom in on some shit and just go and look around and see, like, holy fuck, how much work they put into this shit. Victor Mori is fucking amazing. God. So many great splash arts from that artist.
Used to be one of the biggest inspirations to me as an artist. Illustrators like Victor Mari, Jennifer Woosling.
Oh, Jennifer Woosling, yeah, god damn. That lady has range. Like, she did, like, Soul Fighter Samira. She also did, like, a Nunu and Willump skin, and, like, well, I've made my own video about, like, beautiful splash arts recently. You can go watch that one. But, like, fucking Jennifer Westling. Also, Aurora, I think, was one of her most recent works. No, her most recent was one of the skin splashes. What was it? I can look up that later, but like, fucking, this lady has so much fucking range, you wouldn't believe.
Hey, motivate me to learn more and improve my own work. I'll answer my own question right now.
Fortune, Fortune, she's so good. Also, follow her on social media, like Blue Sky, especially. Because, like, besides just being one of the fucking, one of the great artists at Riot, I think they also have, like, they do a bunch of, what's it called? Gothic Lolita fashion. And just post, like, the most amazing fucking dresses and outfits. Like, absolutely astonishing. Like, God, Fortune K is so fucking cool.
Do better work than these artists. Not yet. But maybe I can bypass the corporate chain of command that limits their full potential and deliver to you all a final product a little bit sooner than anyone who works for a massive company could.
Yeah.
Which brings us back to Shyvana and her potential for a VGU.
Ooh.
A visual and gameplay update.
Yeah, that model isn't meant to be seen from that direction.
6 years or so, the character design team at Riot Games has been giving a select few characters these VGUs to help them feel more consistent with the modern visuals of League of Legends. Sometimes these VGUs change a lot about the character.
Yeah, there are still people who are mad about Galio. Like, because Galio basically erased the old character from the lore and created an entirely new one. Same thing happened to, like, Trundle, and I think a couple of other champions. And Riot has moved away from doing that, which I'm a little upset about. Because, like, new Galio is so much better than the old one. Like, not that there isn't something interesting or good to preserve from old Galio or old Trundle, but, like, the new versions are just way better. And I kind of wish that Riot artists still felt like they had the freedom to just, like, say, no, this isn't good enough. We're removing this champion from the game because, like, their presence isn't really a net good and we can make something better. I wish they still had the freedom and the guts to do that. And it's the corporate guts, right? Like, because Riot, the corporation, is like, oh, we can't upset the players. They'll get mad at us on the internet. Like, and that stymies them away from so many interesting creative decisions. Galio, like, I wouldn't mind a new champion like old Galio, who is like a gargoyle and that really plays with, like, the concept of a gargoyle, who now isn't called Galio and, like, who has his own thing going on. But new Galio is better. I'm sorry. He just is. New Trundle is also better. He just is. I'm sorry. And it's sometimes they remake the character from the ground up, and I'm always the most excited about these, even if it leads to some of the losses of the old champions, right? I have my problems with the new Skarner update. As a concept, yeah, he's better than the Crystal Scorpion. In part because the Crystal Scorpion was never great as a character design. It was, in fact, quite bad, if I'm honest. They've lost some things from his lore that I wish they'd held on to, but, like, as a character design, new Skarner is astonishingly better.
Not just in regards to how they look and play, but also their story and role in the world of Runeterra. Other times, the changes are more like updates, and the character
Mundo.
stays more or less the same, but with new chapters added to their story and
Mundo is actually a good example of why I'm a little bit sort of annoyed with the very faithful updates. Because with Mundo, the problem is, original Mundo, way the hell back, fully a comedy character, right? Like there's no dramatic aspect to his personality. Like they've sort of vaguely hinted that maybe once upon a time he was a normal person who was fucked up by mad science or whatever. But he was always 110% completely a comedy character, right? Like no element of drama or tragedy to it. He was just a silly comedy character. He had to be with a character like design like that. With the update, they were like, okay, we have to stay faithful to the original Mundo, so he has to be a comedy character, but then also he has to be a modern League of Legends character, which means he has to have like a dark, tragic, sad backstory or the emotionally effective, blah, blah, blah. And the mixing of those two in the new Mundo, not that successful, I don't think. I think it would have been a lot stronger if they'd committed to either one or the other. The way they tried to mix the funny, haha, and the tragic, oh, sad, it's tonally very dissonant, and it comes in part from this corporate mandate to stay as close to the original as possible, but also it needs to be modern League of Legends at the same time. It's like pick a lane, right? But, you know.
a fresh new look to match. Shyvana was passed over for a VGU 4 years in a row,
yeah.
losing in player polls to Fiddlesticks, Volibear, Skarner, and Udyr, all while other champions were also getting updates that, well, to be fair, they did need.
Yeah, oh god, Teemo, Jesus Christ. Teemo, oh, especially his animations really badly needed it. Shyvana, though, I thought for sure she was getting a rework years ago. I thought for sure because she is one of the champions that, like, she's not like Zillion. Like, Zillion needs it the most. Corki and Zillion are probably the ones who most need it in modern League of Legends, but she's one of those champions, like, where you transform into her dragon form, and it's just kind of like, oh, that thing is a spindly, weird dragon half creature that's made of sticks and like kind of just doesn't look powerful, you know?
It was frustrating to me as a fan, both as a concept and as a playable character, to see her get snubbed so many times. But at the beginning of 2024, us dragon lovers finally got the news we had been waiting for.
Yes.
After the Arcane-inspired BGU, we're excited to announce that we'll finally be tackling Shyvana.
She has a great theme and has become an iconic part of the league roster.
Woo! Yeah, baby! That's what I've been waiting for. That's what it's all about. Woo!
Shyvana was finally getting a VGU. All those years of waiting, and it was about to pay off. We got to see 3 very rough preliminary.
Again, go look at the concept art that League of Legends artists do for champions, because this is where there isn't any too many cooks in the kitchen. This is where each individual artist really just gets to fucking go ham with a whole bunch of shit. Like the concepts for Fiddlesticks, holy shit, there was some cool concept for Fiddlesticks. Mundo, they went real silly with it. Like they did some funny shit with Mundo in the very original concept stages. Shyvana's update is not really going to be anything as interesting as any of these. These are all, I should say, I'm not sitting here saying that these should just go into League of Legends unchanged, because they are incoherent with the League of Legends aesthetic. They have their problems, but they're more interesting and varied and, like, wild, right? Go look at original concepts for champions. Like, it's all in, like, the wiki has all of it in the development section for each champion. There's some really great, interesting, fascinating pieces and, like, takes on every single one of the more recent champions that's, like, worth looking at.
Sketches from the character design team, heard a brief pitch about how they didn't want to change her all too much, and that the final product would ship sometime in 2025. Well, that was in January.
Yeah.
10 months have gone by, and no new news has been revealed about our beloved half-dragon or her VGU.
To be fair, I think that's partly due to Arcane. Arcane also has a visual update coming out. Everyone's kind of assuming it's Victor. I'm on board with that. I have a crackpot theory in the back of my mind that it might be Janna, or it might be multiple reworks if Riot really want to blow our fucking minds. Doubtful, though, with the pace that Riot puts these things out at. So I think partly the reason why Shyvana hasn't been heard from is that they wanted to focus on Arcane and really stick the landing with that, and they wanted with the Skarner. Like, I just don't think there's been time in the publishing schedule for Riot to really talk about Shyvana. But also, this is par for the course for them. Like, they'll announce, oh, this will drop in 2025, and then it'll be like, no, it needs a little bit more time in the oven, actually, turns out. Because, and this is one of the things I do respect about Riot. This is something I genuinely do respect about the company and its policies and its company culture. Riot is willing to say, this isn't good enough, we're going to take more time with it. Riot is, broadly speaking, willing to say, this isn't good enough, we're not going to publish it, we're going to cancel it, we're going to kill it. They've done it for a lot of things that I wish they would have actually published, because they looked really cool in the stages that they were at. Like, so many games that Riot was sort of working on that could have come to something if they'd put more money and time into it. But it is one of the things I'll respect about them, is that they will sink many, many man-hours and quite a lot of money into developing something. It doesn't work out, and then they go, that's not good enough, we're going to cancel it. We're going to cancel it, we're going to delay it, we're going to rework it. They did it with the MMO recently, after sinking years of development into a version of it that just wasn't working for them. I do respect that from them. Like, that's one of the few parts of Riot's company culture that, like, of course, this is enabled by the fact that they are monstrously, stupidly, insanely profitable, in no small part because of the fucking $500 skin packs that they're putting out now, right? But it is something they're willing to do. They're willing to, like, put artistic integrity sometimes above immediately cashing in on something. So, like, I don't mind if it's going to get delayed. I was expecting it to get delayed. I expect to see Shyvana in 2026 or something. Because that happens with their process a lot of the time. Shit gets iceboxed. It just happens internally. But no, yeah, it's been a long time without any news about Shyvana. Could we at least see some concept art, Riot, please?
To be honest, this comes as no surprise to longtime fans of the game. Massive overhauls of champions like the one we're expecting for Shyvana take a lot of time for a lot of reasons. The one that people like to point to the most is Riot's priority checklist. It seems like the people calling the shots at Riot Games insist on devoting their team's time and energy into projects that can turn around a profit first, and then spending time on things like VGUs for less popular champions.
That's another thing about VGUs. Again, it's the business consideration. Champion updates don't really bring in money for League of Legends. This is maintenance work. This is stuff that's designed to make the game like look like it's up to quality for current year, right? Like, that's from a corporate perspective, that's what it is. They don't bring in a lot of money. Like, a champion gets a rework and a new update, it doesn't really spike their skin sales. It doesn't even necessarily even spike their play rate that much. This is something Riot has shared numbers about many times before. That it's like, and I believe them on that. Like, I believe that that's true. That a champion rework is never going to be as big a deal. It's never going to get as many headlines. It's never going to attract as many new players or get as many old players back as a new champion will. Right? It's never going to sell as many skins as a new champion will. And every time they update a champion, they also have to update every single one of the skins, which compounds the cost, especially for very old champions that have a lot of skins, which is why it's going to take a while before we see a Lux rework, even though she also at this point kind of needs one. And it's one of those things that, like, yes, I can see that, fair enough. Like, I understand that from the capitalism perspective of it all. But also, Riot Games makes umpteen billion motherfuckers of dollars, and, like, you can just cut your executives' pay for 2 years and spend it on paying the artists to do this work instead. There you go, you said. Like, I don't have a lot of sympathy for a corporation like Riot fucking Games, subsidiary of Tencent, being like, oh, but it's too expensive, and it's not, oh, we can't spend our money. You spent how many hundreds of millions of dollars propping up your own esports industry, right? How many hundreds of millions of dollars? And you're telling me you can't spend the extra money on a fucking champion rework? Fuck off, right? Corporation, fuck off. I don't accept that we don't have enough money thing. Even if, yes, this isn't especially a profit venture to do, fuck off. You have the money. Do the maintenance on your game, assholes. The corporation, once again, not the workers.
There's nothing definitively proving this, but if you look at the kinds of things that Riot has shipped out to fans this year, it doesn't seem all that far-fetched. Now, granted, there are a lot of people working for Riot, though it seems like there are fewer and fewer every day, and just because most of their energy goes into things like the $500 Ari skin, doesn't mean that there aren't artists, writers, and game designers hard at work on projects like the Shyvana VGU. I think a bigger reason why we haven't gotten any updates on the current progress of the Shyvana VGU has more to do with the level of quality that they want to reflect in the final product. Like I said before, a VGU doesn't just change visuals, it also changes story and gameplay, and these elements all have to work in harmony to create a cohesive and exciting character design. Fiddlesticks is my favorite example of a successful VGU.
Oh god,
that
yes.
took a lot longer than fans thought it would. One of the original 40 champions that launched with League of Legends, Fiddlesticks was originally nothing more than a spirit Halloween decoration.
He really was.
Stock voice lines about partaking in generally nefarious deeds and packaged in a stiff, lifeless model with all of the articulate dexterity of a frozen Barbie.
Yep.
After over a year and a half of work, however, Fiddlesticks transformed from a joke to a legitimate horror movie.
Fiddlesticks is so fucking good. His animation especially. God, I love his
It's hard to
animation.
explain if you don't actually play League of Legends, but a Fiddlesticks ult from Off Vision has literally jump scared me before. I forget for a second that I'm playing a MOBA and instead feel like I'm fighting for my life in a survival horror game. Fiddle's voice got changed from sounding like a motion-activated porch decoration
Are you afraid?
to award-winning nightmare fuel.
I'm always here.
Kellen Goff, the voice actor for Fiddlesticks, GOAT.
Hero.
Its existing skins got reworked to make the goofy ones scary and the scary ones terrifying, and its incredibly popular
The British Fiddlestick skins is still fucking horrible, though. Awful. Shit. Surprise Party Fiddlesticks is fun. Listen to his voice lines if you have a second.
Prize Party Legendary skin got a new set of voice lines that are so damn well done that they actually made me want to play the champion after years of completely ignoring it.
Hello, little girl. Not afraid of clowns, are you?
These changes didn't happen in a day, or a week, or even a year. They took a team of people working together for countless hours to create something that would stand out, something that would make people proud to be fans of League of Legends. They could have cut corners, sure, they could have found ways to get it out faster, but they were afforded the luxury to take their time with the project while other, more superficial additions to the game kept the money flowing and the corporate shareholders placated.
Seriously, like, again, look up the Fiddlesticks concept art. Look at all the concept art, especially for reworked champions, because, like, man, there's some good shit in there.
My hope, and maybe this is one of those hopes that starts with a C instead of an H, is that they're taking their time with the Shyvana VGU because, well, they're taking their time. I can only speak for myself, but the quality of every VGU that League has produced over the past half-decade has surpassed my expectations. They took their time to create something that was worth the wait, and until I have reason to believe otherwise, I have faith that when we do eventually get an update on the team's project, it's going to be good news. Now, a question that I'm sure a few of you are already asking yourselves or actively commenting on this video is, Jack, why do you even care? Well, it's a question that I've asked myself more than once over the past few years, and
Same.
after the 8th revision of my fan-made VGU. Why do I care so much? This isn't my own character or my own story. I have other projects that I could be spending my time on, from the Enigmorph project to my Observation to Concept series, and of course my ever-popular Pokemon content. Well, I guess the easiest answer...
Again, go watch Subjectiveless content in general. Their Pokemon redesigns are something like, I've been meaning to do shorts about them. I feel bad about it in the same way that I feel bad about doing these reaction commentary videos. It's like, I don't want to profit from their work, but I want to show it off. I want to show people how cool some of the shit they do is.
There is also the simplest one. I love this character. I love her story, the concept behind her design, and the potential that I see for her to become something on par with the incredible modern world of League of Legends. I've been playing her for over a decade now, and my affinity for her role that she plays in the story and in the game has only grown with every passing year. Each year we don't get an official VGU for Shyvana is another year that I attempt to come up with one of my own. And like so many of my other little artistic obsessions, each new installment in what I can only describe as a series showcases just how much I've grown and improved. It's like they're mile markers that denote another new skill I picked up or a new method of approaching a problem. I can look back on the same subject matter I attempted to tackle 5 years ago and compare it to the same subject matter today, and then evaluate clearly what I've improved on and what I still need to learn.
I will say also, if you're an artist out there, pick some of your old art and remake it. Like, especially if you're having an art block. Like, if you, I don't know what to draw, pick some of your old art and remake it from scratch. It's a great exercise. It's also a good way to become conscious of how much you have improved. Like, it's actually, as you're saying. But also, it's a really good way to rediscover, especially like find an old favorite piece of yours. It's a great way to rediscover some of the things that give you joy in your artwork. It's a really, like, as an artistic practice, this is a really good idea.
In a way, Shyvana has become a part of my identity as an artist. Weirdly, the changes I want to see in her design are a reflection of my own goals to become a stronger illustrator. I hope to one day achieve the level of professionalism and skill that the League of Legends art team has, allowing me to bring my own ideas and characters up to that same standard. This brings us to the here and now, my current and arguably most thorough redesign of Shyvana, the Half-Dragon. I guess you could say this took me 4 years to finish, as it builds off of every previous Shyvana concept I've conceived so far. More realistically, everything I'm going to show you today took about a month, and that includes my rough sketches, my turnarounds, all of the explorations I did for the concept, the dragon form, the finished illustrations of Shyvana.
I love watching the process of artists like this, because again, like I said, I'm more of a cartoonist than an illustrator. I can do illustration work. I used to do it for a living a little bit, but, you know, mostly I'm a cartoonist, right? So I'm always looking for the fucking shortcut, right? I'm always looking for what's the fastest, most caricatured, like easiest, most stylized way I can do this without having to fucking dive into the specifics of rendering thing. And that means I take a series of very different shortcuts than someone who's like an illustrator first and foremost would do. But we all still take shortcuts, right? And I love seeing the shortcuts. Like, how does an artist solve the problem of like creating volume, creating depth in an image? And the thing that he did there with the little shadow box, I would just want to examine that in detail for a second. Hang on, excuse me.
Explorations I did for the concept.
Oh, it's like a gradient trick. So like, he's blocking out. Like, what would if we have the light source from below, from like the crack in the ground kind of thing, because she's slamming it with Fire Fist or whatever, and he's blocking out like where would the shadow be, and then he's blocking out like a little bit of like where's the lighting coming from below, and then he's just like erasing around it and allowing that to form the gradient that gives. Oh, that's a great shortcut. That's a great shortcut. That's a fantastic way to do a shortcut. Because I would like my shortcut for something like this would be I just like mark out the areas on the character and just like use a gradient tool. So like slap one on there, and it always looks a little like those always look a little cheap, right? Like, but that because it has that painted thing. Oh, that's a great way to do a shortcut for that for an illustration.
Of Shyvana and the concept art for the way I imagined the character to look while in game. I'll take.
Yeah, look how well that light fucking works out, just with that little like with the like pitch black shadows against like. Oh, that's really good.
You through my process and give you an idea of how I approach a project like this. And when we get to the end, I'll let you guys decide if I really can do my job better than Riot Games. We'll start off with concept exploration. Now, as I said before, this stage of the process has technically taken me years to work on. I'm always bouncing ideas around in my head and have been for Shyvana for a long time now. I've already done a video wherein I worked with a few of my friends to create a VGU design for Shyvana, but that was a long time ago. However, a lot of the ideas we came up with in that video are ones I'd still like to build off of.
Yeah, so if you're not an artist, right, like if you're not really, you look at all the sort of half sketches he just did there and you kind of go, wait, those were all fire, those were all really cool, why didn't keep going? This is one of the most important skills you can have, especially as an illustrator, is fail faster, right? Draw a sketch, block it out, like try and see if you can capture the idea. If it doesn't work for you, fuck it, delete the whole thing. Don't try and like, don't noodle over something and try and rescue it forever. Every artist does this. Every one of us fails at that particular little principle. But like, if you can just like, oh shit, this isn't working, start over, snap, start over. Like use what you learned from the sketch that didn't work and start over with a new one. And the more times you do that, the faster you get better. I promise you this.
However, with this attempt, I'd like to take a somewhat different approach with Shyvana's story. Ever see concept art of a character that looks wildly different from the final product and think, well, that wouldn't have worked for that character? And of course, you're right. The reason why that wouldn't work is because the writers were trying to design a character to play a role to fit their story, not the other way around. My last few Shyvana VGUs used her existing lore to create visuals that would best represent her story, or rather, better represent her story than her current visuals do. But what if Shyvana's story was a little bit different? What would change about how she looked? Another champion who recently received a VGU, Udyr, is a good example of how these changes don't necessarily have to rewrite a character's story.
I like that little. It's a small thing. So, contrapposto I think the technical term for it. But when you have a character and you want their posing and their posture to be like dynamic, to feel like it has energy and motion and movement, a shortcut to that is to offset the hips, the shoulders, but also, like, in my opinion, the neck, right? So you can see it there that the shoulders, they have a little bit of a tilt in this direction, right? And the hips have a little bit of a tilt in that direction. So you get this pinching and stretching on alternate sides of the character that gives that a little bit of that dynamic feel to it. But then also they do it, he does it with the head. Look at that. Like, the head is tilted in a contrary tilt to the shoulders, and that adds that little sense of, like, a little sense of power, a little sense of, like, I'm challenging you, or like I'm doing the fucking, like, walking forward, like, Dio, you're coming to me, like the gesture. It's a good little gesture. I like that.
They instead build off of the existing story. It's almost like giving a canonical in-universe explanation for why the character looks different.
That's one thing about, like, again, Shyvana's. Let me just double check since I fucking have the tab open now. Shyvana now is conceptualized as her armor is her mother's body. Her mother conceived her egg. Her egg was stolen, and then the human mage who was raising the egg corrupted it. And her mother was like, well, I'm a dragon supremacist, so fuck you. I'm going to kill you because you are a bastard. You are an abomination. You are wrong in the world, right? Like, that's her current lore. And part of that is that Shyvana battles and kills her own mother with Jarvan's help, and then uses her body to craft her armor and weapons out of, which is a little bit turbo fucked up from every direction that you think of it. Is that still it? It was her lore at one point, but I believe, did they get rid of that? Actually, I should say nope. Yeah, no. Partly. She still helped carry her mother's skull back to Demacia. I don't think her armor is still made from her mother, but that used to be part of her story. That's why that was a justification that was sort of written into lore about why all of her stuff looks like it's made up, has like dragon faces on it and shit like that. It was literally made out of a dragon who was also her mom. I'm glad they removed that detail.
For this attempt at a VGU for Shyvana, I decided to add on to her official lore with a story of my own. Everything about her origin remains the same, but at a certain point in the timeline, things take a turn for the worse.
Oh, lay it on me.
During the Ruination, when the ruined King Viego spread his influence over every corner of Valoran, Shyvana succumbed to the darkness within her heart.
Ruination. Yeah, okay. I'm going to hold my tongue, because otherwise this ostensible commentary reaction video is going to be 5 hours long and not about this video at all. But the Ruination was a mixed bag. Mixed bag, especially in terms of character design. I do not care for what they did with ruined Shyvana very much, unfortunately. They made her way too human. It's not really that much in the animated thing that we're seeing here, but like in the fucking splash art and the character design they did for her ruined form, they just made her into a beautiful looking ordinary normal human, and it undercut so much of what her story is about in some really nasty. Anyway,
she lost control, and everyone in Demacia was able to see her for what they had always feared she must be, a mindless beast of destruction and chaos. Though these events transpired under unprecedented circumstances, and though after Viego was defeated by the Sentinels of Light, Shyvana returned to her right mind, the people of Demacia had become terrified of their so-called protector.
It should also be said, the Ruination didn't go over super well with a bunch of lore freaks like me. I don't think the Ruination event and like the tie-in stuff that they did numbers either, because they haven't really returned to it. But then also, like, shortly after the Ruination happened, that was the point when Riot, like, Arcane kind of made Riot go, we're going to center our entire universe around this thing now. And there was a bunch of retcons that happened and all sorts of bullshit. So I'm just moving my model around here a little bit, sorry. So how much of this is going to remain canon in Shyvana? Like, how much of the Ruination is even going to remain canon in Shyvana's story once the VGU hits? We don't actually know how much of this is even gonna matter to her. That's not a criticism of the story he's saying. It's just, again, a little bit of context, like that there was a story in canon where Shyvana was mind-controlled by Viego and turned into a monster that attacked Demacia, which, you know, that's the kind of thing that's kind of hard to recover from when you live in a nation that's entirely bigoted towards magical creatures. How much of that is going to matter in her updated VGU and her story in that instance? Fucked if I know, man. I just really hope they don't base the VGU on ruined Shyvana. I would be so fucking annoyed by that.
Had to be done. Under pressure from the general population, as well as the mage seekers, King Jarvan IV turned against the woman that he claimed to love. She retained her position as head of the Dragon Guard, but to quell general concerns amongst his people, Jarvan insisted that when she was not on active duty, Shyvana would be banished to a remote tower outside the city limits,
Ooh.
chained like an animal within a prison of petricite.
See, that's interesting, because I've written my own fanfiction about Shyvana and Jarvan in my What's the Deal with Shyvana video. I'm interested in that, because, like, Jarvan as a character is torn between two loyalties. He has the loyalty to his nation, like, that he believes, like, I am the sovereign of Demacia, and I shall protect them, blah, blah, blah. And one of the things that his subjects want is the persecution of magic, and persecution of magical creatures, and the destruction of magical creatures within the borders of Demacia. And Jarvan is heavily implied to be in love with Shyvana, if not outright confirmed. And he has sort of taken her on as an assistant and as someone who's like always at his side and it's like a close advisor. And that's something that's cost him politically, right? But he's always held to that he cares for her and he will not allow Demacia like to turf her out. And he's insisting like, you can have a place in Demacia at my side. But then Silas happened. Then the Mage Rebellion happened, where Silas took the blame for killing Jarvan's dad. Silas is another champion who's like a rebel who leads the mages in like a rebellion against the oppression of magic in Demacia. It was actually an assassin from Noxus who did it, but, you know, never mind. And Jarvan has this thing of like, well, he killed my personal dad personally, so like now all mages are evil and bad. And Shyvana a little bit... Exactly how she feels about it is something that's not... Again, the Ruination tried to address some of this by like, she becomes mind-controlled specifically because she has a lot of grudge with Jarvan and with Demacia for the way that they treat her. But Mage Seeker, the video game, which is like the more recent canon, still has them together, and Shyvana saves Jarvan's life and like cares for him. So it's an interesting idea, this thing of like that Jarvan would in the end cave to the pressure and like enslave Shyvana, essentially. That's an interesting idea for a fanfiction, because I kind of went the other way with the way that I wrote it, that same story, that like Shyvana, it's demanded by the Demacian people that Shyvana be executed, because like you can't have a magical creature and she's been corrupting the prince, and so the anti-magic forces within the government conspire to stage a public execution where Jarvan has to be the one who makes the call, right? Like execute her, or else stand by her side, right? And I leave it ambiguous about whether he does it or not, but my thinking was always like this was going to be the thing that was going to force Jarvan to renounce his claim to power in favor of like giving a shit about people's lives, right? So it's interesting to go the other way and like make Jarvan just a straight up fucking monster. I don't mind that. Fuck Jarvan. He's a piece of shit most of the time. Cool. Interesting.
She was also sentenced to wear a suit of armor of this magic-absorbing stone in order to suppress her latent powers. This made it difficult, if not impossible, for her to achieve her true form, and over time she struggled to maintain consistent victories over the dragons that she encountered. Finally, after months of isolation and abuse, not only from her foes but from those who she once considered to be her friends, the words of Silas finally began to take shape in her head.
Yes.
She had dismissed them at first when she faced the unshackled mage in combat to defend her city. He had no right to besmirch the names of Jarvan and his people. They were flawed, short-sighted, and perhaps misguided. Surely, though, they were not as blinded by hatred as Silas claimed they were. Now, she knew.
Oh, I can't actually remember if I brought this up in the script to my What's the Deal with Shyvana video, but like Shyvana as an ally of Silas, there's a good fan fiction in there. Like if you like sort of angsty, angry crack ships where one of the characters like wears chains on their hands and the other one's a giant monster girl, like Silas and Shyvana, there's a good dynamic here. I like this.
The truth. She had only managed to escape the bigotry of Demacia for as long as she had remained within the king's favor. Now, at her lowest point, even her closest friend turned his back on her. She was just another mage, another abomination that needed to be locked away or destroyed. She wouldn't let it happen. Jarvan was wrong. Silas was wrong. The fragile-minded people of Demacia were all wrong. She was not just another mage. She was a dragon, an ancient power through which the very essence of Runeterra surged. Their chains would not hold her. Their words could not bind. The might of Shyvana's ancestors ignited in her veins, and the petricite armor began to crack and glow. It had absorbed more magic than it could hold, and the pristine white of the stone began to turn red, like cloth soaked in blood. Her eyes were embers, her mouth an inferno, her claws like the inevitable grip of death. As the tower crumbled, she could feel the chill of the winter air as it spiraled and steamed around her. She was a comet, launched from the earth and into the endless sky. Her ascent could be seen for miles, and the people of Demacia cowered in fear. Good, she thought. If they would make a monster out of me, then a monster they shall have. She took off into the darkness, igniting the sky around her like a hurricane of fire. She would return, and Jarvan would answer for his betrayal.
Yes, get him, girl!
Sorry, everyone.
Kick that shithead's ass. Interesting. So petricite, again, adding some context here. Petricite is a kind of tree that grows in Demacia, which has the property of absorbing magic, right? And so any mage who spends time around petricite is going to find their magic drained out of them over time. And so Demacians have like concocted potions made of petricite that they force feed to mages, which makes them very, very sick. Nearly kills them. It's a kind of poison, but also suppresses their magical abilities. They have shackles made of petricite to suppress mages' powers, to imprison them, to hold them. What Demacia doesn't know, though, is that petricite doesn't drain magic. It absorbs and stores it like a battery. That's how Silas is able to do many of the things that he does, is because he has learned to manipulate that property of petricite. Interesting to use that here also. But yeah, that's just, what petricite is and how it works. It's like, it's a battery, and if you can access the magic that's stored inside a petricite, you can do some truly silly things with it.
The Jarvan Shyvana ship is dead. Well,
good.
It all depends. I mean, what's a good love story without a little drama, Think about it. How could Shyvana really commit to a man who would persecute her for who she was born to be? Who knows? Maybe Jarvan will see the error of his ways at the tip of Shyvana's molten claws.
Yes.
I did want to leave room for a lot of potential storytelling with this piece. Obviously, this is only the beginning of what would become a great journey for Shyvana, Jarvan, and the people of Demacia. Something in line with the tragedy and theater of Arcane. Something that would get fans equally intrigued. The story also opens up the possibilities for a whole new kind of Shyvana. Not one subservient to the authority of Demacia, but one who has embraced her true self and is ready to unleash it upon the world that has been so unkind to her.
Should also be said, Demacia is definitely one of the regions that would be a possible setting for an Arcane-like show. Like, it has the characters, it has the storylines to carry a show like that. That's sort of built in, like Silas Lux, Jarvan Garen, like Shyvana in particular, the whole thing about like mages and mage seekers, there's definitely material there to carry a storyline like that. So I wouldn't be mad about Demacia as another setting for an Arcane-like show. And like, they're right in saying like Shyvana especially has a lot of potential in that regard.
I needed a design to fit this new persona. She had to look wild, untamable, and powerful. In these preliminary sketches, I explore a few different visuals. To be honest, these roughs were done before I had decided on this slightly modified new lore of Shyvana.
I like getting rid of the gauntlets on this one. I like that. The gauntlets, to me, have always been one of the most awkward parts of Shyvana's character design. The idea of them is that they are two halves of a dragon's head, right? So a top jaw and a lower jaw, and she can like slam them together and breathe fire out of them. It's like, the visuals, I get the purpose of it, but for Shyvana specifically, they just always felt kind of clunky and awkward. They didn't really feel like weapons that were like powerful or dangerous in their own right. I like the idea of her with bare hands controlling fire a lot more than her with gauntlets. I kind of wish that, I hope that And that's one of the things, like, I don't think the rework can get rid of the gauntlets. I think the gauntlets are one of those things that's just, it's been a part of her character design for so long. Whether or not it's good doesn't really matter so much as, well, that's what Shyvana looks like, so she has to have the gauntlets because she's always had the gauntlets, and we can't think outside of that box. That's one of my worries about Riot's rework, is that they just won't surrender the gauntlets because, like, the Shyvana fans will get mad. She doesn't have her gauntlets anymore. We can't do that. It's like, we have to respect the player's wishes. Blah, blah, blah. Like, where they spend so long pretending to respect the player's wishes that they kind of forget to respect the player's like dignity by like affording them by instead of just giving them what they think the players want, give them something which they genuinely believe is better than what they already have, right?
It was actually one of these sketches that inspired the story. This one, here, in the middle. I was really just exploring different possible visuals to replace the current one we have for Shyvana, and this one stood out to me. She was so confident, so immovable, and I loved the energy it gave off. I took that rough sketch and decided to refine it. As I worked into it, the narrative I just read to you...
Yeah, because, like, on this one, I can see the idea of the chest plate. Like, I can see a little bit of sexualization, like we get some cleavage in there. That's not a bad idea. At all, necessarily, especially for a champion who's, like, supposed to be a little bit wild. Like, it's problematic, but one of the visual tropes that we have that's associated with wildness and barbarity, right? Like, when you think of, like, a barbarian in D&D, you think of a shirtless guy, right? Like, it's that lack of clothing, because clothing is a marker of, like, restraint and civilization a lot of the time. So, like, giving her a little bit of cleavage, like, making her a little naked, that's a good idea. I don't know that I love the dragon head as a centerpiece. I get the visual idea of it. I don't think that really works, to be honest. Like, maybe in a final version it'll make more sense to me, but here it just kind of pulls away from her face, her actual face. And, like, what you could do in the animation is, like, have her split in half when she transforms. Like, a giant maw opens up in her mouth and her body sort of extends back from that. That would be badass as hell. I don't know if that's necessarily the idea. I kind of prefer keeping her human face as the center of her expression without the dragon thing there. I would remove the face from the dragon crest anyway, so that it doesn't look like it has an expression that's, like, separate or competing with her face, but that's just me.
Started to form in my head, and as the story formed, the visuals developed along with it. I made her look more haggard, more rough around the edges.
I do love that.
A torn loincloth, cracked armor, and broken chains that hung from her waist. Unlike most of my other...
Yeah, that's a little bit better, because that's less explicitly a face. That looks more like a breastplate, and less like just the dragon's face stapled to the front of her body. I do love the fucking wild mane, though. Because, like, Shyvana in her original design, I think I actually have the character model up over here. She has this thing, right? Like, again, her armor is made from a dragon's body, so this is like the dragon's tail that she's, like, stapled to the back of her head to hold her ponytail. But that's also very restrained, right? Like, that's her hair being, like, clamped into this restraining structure. Sort of in a way that, like, again, unleashed wild hair. There's problematic elements to that, but hair which is, like, wild, like, matted, mangled, untamed, like, points out in all directions, that's also a good visual signifier of wildness. It's associated with that a lot. Whereas hair that's tightly bound up in ponytails or, like, pulled back, like, think of the classic, like, librarian nerd who's, like, a beautiful woman, but she wears glasses and she has a ponytail that's really tight, and then she lets her hair down and all of a sudden everyone goes, oh my god, she's beautiful. That thing, right? Like, having the hair tied up is a visual signifier for feminine characters in particular of being uptight. Also for male characters, but less stereotypically so. So I like that. I like the wild mane. That's really cool.
Shyvana designs. This one showed a lot more skin, or, well, perhaps scales is the more accurate term.
Another thing, this is just before I suspect with the color scheme, it's going to stick reasonably close to the base model with, like, the red and gold and purple. I would explore giving her a different skin color than purple. Like, given that she's an elemental fire drake, like, pure black scales, for example, something closer to a skin tone, maybe, like, to sort of contrast against the red. Like, there's other options there than purple. Purple is cool, but it is one of those things, like, when you're doing these radical explorations of what a character could be, maybe question whether purple is the right one, right? Like try and see if there's maybe some other color that could play into that, like something that's maybe more explicitly based on the elemental drakes of Runeterra already. Because the fire drake, to the best of my knowledge, doesn't have purple in its color scheme, for example.
I wanted to convey that she was breaking free of the constraints that this world had bound her to, and her true self was able to show through. Arguably one of the most iconic elements of Shyvana's existing silhouette are her claw-like weapons and horn helmet. Instead of removing these pieces, as I felt like she would have no need for man-made armor or weapons, I replaced them with natural features that elevated feelings of might. Unshackled from the bigotry of Demacia, Shyvana is able to fully express her true power. Even when
Yes.
she's
Oh
in
shit,
human
that
form.
fucking fucks.
This means she no longer needs metal and stone to aid
That, the fire, like the dragon-shaped fire elemental thing curling around her arms, that goes hard. That fucks. I love that. That rules. Yes, replace the gauntlets with, like, these fire constructs that she makes around her hands. Oh, yes. Fuck yeah. I don't know that I love the chains. Like, I get this, like, the chains being the thing of, like, she was chained up in a tower, she's broken free, they kind of still hang around her waist, but they're, like, dangling chains to signify that she's broken free. It's a good idea. The problem is Silas does that already. And that's kind of his whole thing is based around that. I maybe wouldn't use that again in this way. Like, to me, that steps a little bit too much on Silas's territory. Of course, we don't have to care about Silas when we're doing this. Again, Riot would have to care about Silas. Riot would have to care about not repeating these things. As artists, we can just kind of do whatever the fuck you want. My thinking is still, this feels too Silas-like. If she's not explicitly going to be an ally of Silas, I would probably, like, not have the chains there. I also get, from a silhouette perspective, and, like, in terms of the weight of the character, the chains definitely serve a purpose in terms of, like, concentrating detail and, like, adding a counterpoint to, like, the top of the character. Definitely. Maybe something else? Like, maybe have the, like, instead of the full shackles hanging, have, like, a little bit of chain hanging off of the thing, and then do maybe something else with, like, the skirt or something else. Because, like, the shackles around the legs, I think also, again, too Silas-like. Silas is the character who's still wearing the shackles around his limbs. Not on his feet, though. He doesn't have them on his feet, so that's kind of fair enough, I guess. Interesting. Also, hello, ma'am. Good to see you. Can I offer you anything? Food, drink, place to lay your head?
her in battle. The raw strength, both physical and magical, of her draconic blood is her weapon. Those claws actually took longer to design than I thought they would. I do still like how Shyvana's claw weapons evoke the image of a dragon head, two jaws with one on either arm that, when used together, can bite down on an opponent. My original sketch had them looking more like extensions of her arms rather than flaming dragon jaws. I really liked the shape that the claw design gave Shyvana's silhouette. However, them just being claws had two major problems. The first being that they robbed her of something that was more dragon-specific. Claws could belong to any number of large monsters or just animals, and we want Shyvana, especially this iteration of Shyvana, to be as draconic as possible. Secondly, and to the same point, it was a little too similar to Udyr, whose glowing fists take on the shape of things like bear claws, tiger claws, and eagle talons. After some time sketching, I settled on a solution that I was happy with. Angular jaws of flames with the top and bottom jaw on each arm respectively. This would make it so that when she fought in her human form, she would still take on the appearance of a dragon. These elemental claws will change, though, as you'll see later on in my process. The next step was to figure out colors. In the past, I've experimented with breaking the traditional Shyvana color palette. Shyvana's is a primary color scheme. Red.
I still really fucking love the face design of that old redesign. Like, because Shyvana's story is very much about this thing of, like, she lives in this society of humans, almost, like, well, not exclusively humans, but, like, this society of people who, like, judge others very much by their appearance, right? Like, who are sort of, like, scared of, the signifiers of magic, but which values conformity. And this is something you can kind of see in the other redesign that subjectively is showing off here. This, I believe, was the one where he was trying to show her more as, like, she's trying to fit into a Demacian aesthetic by adopting their armor aesthetic, like, which is very, like, sheer white and gold. Like, that's a very conformist society. I like the monstrous face here, like the one that, like, really genuinely has an inhuman aspect to it, and it's kind of scary on first look. Because that's the kind of thing that, like, Demacians would get fucking bigoted about that in a hurry, because, like, anything that looks weird or different or looks like it's outside of the Demacian aesthetic, that's something they're scared of. That's something they react against, right? Like, because they are a conformist and conservative and reactionary society like that. Like, so I really fucking like the face on this one.
With breaking the traditional Shyvana color palette. Shyvana's is a primary color scheme, red, blue, and yellow. Very simple, but effective. The three primary colors play off each other in such a way that they create a lot of contrast. Though sometimes too much contrast at too many different points on a character's design can get distracting.
Yep.
Here, Shyvana's traditional colors would remain, but with some tweaks to their saturation and distribution so that important parts of her design would be easily distinguishable.
I quite like, I don't know if he's going to stick with those exact color values, but like, I do like making the red duller and kind of darker than her skin, because that sort of, again, that emphasizes her body rather than the gear that she's wearing. If we're sort of going for this is Shyvana unleashed in her natural form, like without all the trappings of civilization sort of constraining her or trying to conform her to a certain vision or ideal, then like, yes, absolutely. Let me just, why is my avatar all the way over there? There we go.
Her red horns, a natural part of her anatomy, would frame her blue face along with her petricite armor, which, if you remember from the story, has turned a similar shade of red. Since the matching red of her horns and armor are among the darkest elements of her palette.
See, this is where, like, the story that he told, I would probably make that petricite armor more destroyed and broken and kind of cracked. Again, and maybe even in a way to mimic dragon scales. Again, I feel like the face thing is like, it should be holes that have been like punched out of the armor. Then, like something pierced it from the inside out when she unleashed her power, kind of almost blasted the whole thing off of her. Given that this is supposed to be the petricite armor that she like freed herself from, this looks a little too clean. Like I can see the breaking thing there, right? Like that there's this breaking, shattered a little bit look to it, kind of. I think that could be emphasized more. I think you could go harder on making these things like something that feels like they're sort of struggling to hold together, almost like Zerath's coffin or something like that.
And her face is among the lightest. They create a striking point of contrast that draws a viewer's eyes up to match Shyvana's gaze.
Good.
Her hair, much more symbolic and visual in this design than her original form, remains a dark blue. It too frames Shyvana's face with her twin braids hanging down in front of either pointed ear. She has...
Again, this is the place where, like, I would be tempted to at least try pure black hair. Again, to, like, specifically visually to invoke charcoal. To invoke something that's been charred and burned. Like, pure black hair, maybe with, like, red embers at the end of it, or some kind of inner red glow, like it's made of magma or something like that. That would be a thing that I would try at the very least. Like, I don't think we get to see, like, the whole iteration process that Subjectively is using here. God knows how many other sketches that they aren't showing right now. I would have maybe tried, like, have the hair not blend so much with her body color, but, like, make it its own point of sort of contrast or something. Might not have worked. Like, I'm not saying this is the thing, oh, this would have made it better. Just, that's a thing I'm really interested to see if that would work.
Another much longer braid that is almost as long as her body and hangs down behind her. This braid adds to her silhouette the implied shape of a tail. And this is a visual motif that I've used in almost every redesign of Shyvana that I've done. I really, really hope they do something like this with the official VGU.
That's another thing, like, with the braid, again, if we're doing Shyvana Unleashed, I would also like to see an exploration of, like, what if she didn't have that tight braid, right? Like, what if she had hair that was maybe still braided, but not necessarily in this, like, one single tight sort of geometric structure that's, like, really tightly twisted and held on, but something that feels a little bit more wild, maybe multiple tendrils or something like that. I think it's supposed to evoke a tail, right? Like, and that's powerful. That's really, really effective. There's a good reason to have it. But again, it's one of those things, like, for something like this, I would love to see an iteration where you explore what's the alternative to that. Like, what's the other thing we can do with the braid? Maybe they still will. There's plenty of video left, but that's my thinking right now.
This braid is more than just a fashion statement. It's another symbol of Demasia's control over Shyvana.
Yeah.
Perhaps at another time in her life, Shyvana's hair was allowed to grow wild and free. Now, though it's too unruly and grows too quickly to cut, it's still bound in a tight braid, restricted and confined as Shyvana is. When she transforms into her dragon form, this hair is set free. And I really wanted that to be a big part of the dragon's design.
Okay, now I get it. See, that, there we go. That's a great rationale for that. Like, to have that element in her character design still of a little bit of restraint so that you can, because of course there's the transformation. I'm sitting here forgetting about the fucking dragon form, like an idiot. Very good. That's cool. I like that.
The first hasty sketch I did of Shyvana's dragon form for this project was pretty similar to her current design. Slender, saturated, and somewhat generic. your standard fantasy dragon with the addition of a thick white braid. This was before I decided to unleash her hair in her dragon form. I did a second render of a dragon form that I actually spent way more time on than I think I needed to. While I don't hate this look, it's basically another updated version of Shyvana's existing dragon form. Granted, I added a few things that I thought were missing, like a functional mouth and some more menacing hardware, but all in all, it didn't really reflect that savage ferocity that I described in Shyvana's story. Now, I actually decided all of this as I was writing this script, after I thought I had finished with all of the illustration work that I was going to do for this project.
Oh, I've been there, buddy.
But I was so happy with the story and felt strongly that this design just wasn't cutting it. I needed a merciless beast, an unstoppable force of nature that was fueled by rage and ancient magic. To achieve this goal, I tried another method of sketching. Instead of starting with lines, I started with shapes. I used one of our custom...
This, by the way, silhouette sketching, thumbnail sketching like that, very powerful tool. If you want to rapidly iterate through various versions of like an idea, sketching like that is way better than trying to actually sit down and construct. Sketching around silhouettes, sketching around like just, especially, and he's doing it quite large here. I like to do it tiny, like tiny on my fucking tablet screen or tiny on a piece of paper, so that you don't worry about details, so that you're forced to only think about shape. It can be a very great way to iterate through a lot of different ideas quickly, and it can be a great way to break your habits or come up with a shape idea that's completely outside your normal wheelhouse. So like, I like that.
Custom subjectively oil painting brushes, specifically the wide scratchy brush, and carved out a very rough silhouette that more accurately described the
Yeah, that's more lion-like with the wild mane and shit like that. I like the cat-like aspect that's being brought in here. That's quite cool.
dragon that I saw in my head. On all fours, she was almost wolf-like in appearance. A
Yeah, or
massive,
wolf-like.
shaggy
Yeah,
mane
I
rose
guess.
above her head like tongues of flame, and she was lit from within like a great furnace. She retained her red horns, now larger and growing brightly, as well as her purple, scaly skin. Her petricite armor has shattered and fallen away, replaced by red plating of similar color but organic and of her actual body. Because in her dragon form, Shyvana scrambles around on all fours rather than actually flying, I drew this form as it would appear terrestrially. However, I also quickly sketched out the same design from a top-down perspective and in flight. I would like to see Shyvana fly around a little bit more in her dragon form in-game with an eventual
look at that
visual.
glow.
It would really solidify the fantasy of playing as a dragon, and the other...
Yeah, I don't know that I love the head construction of this version. There's something too flat-nosed and kind of restrained about it. I get it from a silhouette perspective. I'd like to see a version of that with an elongated face, like with a longer set of jaws that sort of stretches out forward a little bit more, because we have this, like, it looks a little stubby there, which has the risk of looking a little clumsy, rather than something that, because Shyvana is an intelligent predator, right? Like, she's someone who has, like, her faculties, he has the mind of a human or a person inside of there. It's not just feral all the time. Again, maybe that's the point of this thing. This is a feral version of Shyvana that isn't thinking, right? But I'd like to see a version of that instead of sort of bending in on itself here, maybe flows a little bit more forwards into. Again, though, that might make it also just more for a traditional dragon, and the point was kind of to get away from that, so mileage may vary.
It would really solidify the fantasy of playing as a dragon, and the other two dragon characters we have can fly. This is a slightly rougher sketch than the other one that I did. Like I said, it was done in only a few hours as I was writing this script, but it's a much better representation of how I'd like Shyvana's dragon form to look. Sometimes it's...
Being lit up from the inside by fire is, like, also, yes, especially having that come out through, like, her mane of hair is, like, woo. Because that opens up the possibility in terms of, like, when she uses a really powerful ability, for example, that her hair could, like, literally turn into flames, right? Like, literally burst into fire. Oi. I like that a lot. I also like that it sort of turns into, like, almost like the... What are they called? Like the back scales on one of those dinosaurs running down the thing. I was like, that's quite cool.
better to be more gestural and less refined with your sketching. It can allow you to convey emotion a lot more freely, and this dragon design definitely has a lot more emotion than my first one. With colors and designs finished, it was time to start working on what I consider to be the finished product of this project, a 2D illustration done in the style of a League of Legends in-game character model. This would be the best way for me to convey to others how I imagine a post-VGU Shyvana to look once she has finally made it into the game. League of Legends has this semi-isometric top-down perspective, meaning that all of their characters are seen from above while in-game. When illustrating a mock-up of an in-game character model for League, it does make it feel more convincing if you render it from this perspective. Doing so will help you get an idea of what elements of your design are most seen or not seen at all from the point of view of a player. I actually used Set's pose as a reference to pose Shyvana. I wanted her to exude a similar level of confidence and strength. This pose also would...
I think the crown needs to, the brow horns need to be bigger from this perspective top down. A little bit. That's one of the things, again, like League of Legends champions are designed to be seen from this perspective, right? Like a lot of focus in terms of the way that they're put together is about this, like about like what details do you concentrate where? Like, because there are certain places on a character model that's seen mostly from the top down, where if you put a bunch of detail, especially a bunch of important detail there, that's just not really going to be visible to the player. You want to focus the key points of interest on places that are visible from an in-game perspective, which again, that puts certain limitations on the kind of design you can do when you are Riot Games, right? Like, because you have to present this thing from top down looking good in-game primarily first and foremost, and then all other considerations kind of have to come after.
Allow me to show off the parts of the character that I'd want a player to see the most: her head, her chest, and her arms. I illustrated all of this against a PNG image of the Rift, the default map that players use in a game of League of Legends, and if I needed to make any modification to her colors in order to have her palette work in harmony with the background, I would be able to recognize that while I worked. Remember, in all cases of illustration, you should consider not just the elements of your character's design, but the context in which your character will be seen. If your vision for the character is to have it set against a backdrop, design that character against the backdrop. Don't wait until the illustration is done to add other elements to the design.
I think now I know with the chains. I think I would like them to be different lengths. I understand making them symmetrical, but symmetry also implies orderliness. Symmetry also applies a certain level of like, oh, this is how they were meant to be. Whereas, imagine if one of the chains was like a broken chain link that was like substantially shorter than the other one, or maybe one of them even dragged a little bit along the ground, kind of. That would give more of a vibe of like, I have literally just torn myself out of the wall. And I didn't do that evenly by like slicing each chain off at the same length of link. I get symmetry, again, that's also a thing that sort of matters for in-game readability of the character. I might have made them asymmetrical if you want to keep the chains on there. And asymmetry would have been a way to imply like the violence with which these things were torn from the wall where they were attached.
It's like color.
Also, I don't think I like the way... this is a point of criticism that I think the crown horns here need to sit a little bit lower on her brow.
Values and shape are all affected by the environment that the character exists in. After blocking in my rough colors, I spent a good amount of time rendering textures. League character models have a shocking amount of detail put into them, even though the characters are often seen from a considerable distance. It's a tricky balance, including enough detail so that the 3D modelers can create believable forms, but also not including so much detail that elements of the design become more difficult to read from a distance. The easy way to work around these problems is to map out your more visible shapes first, so that you know everything is legible, and be sure that as you add in little details, you continually look at your illustration from a good distance. It also helps to work with layers in an illustration like this. I don't always use a ton of layers when I work digitally, and especially when I'm trying to achieve more traditional looking finished products. This is not one of those cases, and I have no reason not to utilize the full breadth of benefits of working digitally. Shyvana's skin was on one layer, her armor on another, and so on. This allowed me to hone in on details without worrying about smudging over into other elements of the design. It also...
Yeah, I have two modes of working on a digital illustration. Either I have 4,500 billion layers, none of them are labeled, they're all in random order, I have no idea where anything is, or else it's like 2 layers, and I painted half of it over the fucking sketch layer without realizing it. Those are the only 2 modes I have.
Allowed me to adjust individual components of the character without affecting the rest of it. This is important if you're constantly reevaluating the illustration to see how it looks from different perspectives. Once I had Shyvana finished, there was one final element I wanted to address. Pun intended. Often with these videos, I don't go into any kind of gameplay changes that I'd be interested in including for the character's VGU. Though a true VGU does include a change of kit and gameplay style, I am not a game designer and I am not as interested in changing those elements of a character's design. However, since I love Shyvana so much and I actually play her, I thought I'd include a gameplay change I'd like to see for her in her VGU that would actually affect her visuals. Shyvana's current passive ability makes her stronger every time her team defeats a dragon, but what if instead of just getting a small amount of armor and magic resistance, her other stats changed as well? More damage for every Infernal Drake, more resistances for every mountain, more lifesteal on Ocean Drakes. Basically, Shyvana gets enhanced stats from the standard benefits her team gets from dragons, and perhaps it even changes her kit slightly too, like in Wild Rift. I'm sure this would be a balancing nightmare, and again, I don't know enough about game design to give honest input as to whether or not this is even a good idea. I just love to see more objective-based gameplay mechanics in League, like how
Yeah, I like this as an idea that, like, as she slays a mountain drake, like, it changes, like, the shape of, like, the ability thing that she has on the thing. I do think that leads to a lot of problems with, like, how do you integrate that blue into her color scheme here as such? Like, you'd have to give her different forms for each of the dragon forms. Kind of like, that would turn her a little bit too much into Udyr in some ways, maybe. It's a cool idea, though. Like, Shyvana having some real interactions with the dragons on Summoner's Rift, I would like that too very much. That's one of the things I'm kind of hoping for with the rework, is that there's some more explicit attention being paid to the idea that Shyvana has more connection to draconic powers than, you know, the average person.
Belveth gets additional buffs from taking Void objectives. I designed a few ideas for what Shyvana's claws would look like under the effects of different dragon souls. These are a little unfinished, but I wanted to have some visuals to represent my idea. A teacher I had in college always told me, if you have an idea, put it on paper. Why explain what I'm thinking verbally when I can show it to you? So, though I'm missing Chemtech and Hextech, here are a few rough ideas for how Shyvana's visuals and gameplay could change depending on the types of dragons her team defeats. This was a ton of work, and by the time I had finished the 4 different arm designs, I realized why it might be taking the official VGU team so long. Everything I did here really amounts to only the first stage of the character design process for VGUs, and if you factor in all of the other ideas I've had up until this point, it's really taken me over 4 years to get to these conclusions. However, if I really wanted to give you a finished product, as in a functional, new playable character for the game, I would still need to finish the turnaround for her in-game render, finish rendering a turnaround for Shyvana's dragon form, finalize all of the concept for all of her alternate dragon soul weapons, not only for her human form, but also for her dragon form, hire someone to design and rig a model for the character, multiple models for 12 different forms, as we discussed previously, hire an animator to bring it all to life, again, essentially 12 separate sets of animations, finish designing her kit so that it's balanced and fun to play, write voice lines and special interactions for her, hire a voice actress to deliver those lines, paint splash art for her default skin, and then repeat the process 7 times for all of her other skins. You start to get an idea of where all that money Riot is making goes when you really break down the process of designing or redesigning a character.
Yeah, I mean, yes, it is very expensive to do these things. Also, on top of that, most of Riot's money goes to their shareholders, same as any corporation. Just, they don't sink most of it into Champion production. They don't sink most of it into VGU production, for damn sure. It's still expensive. Like, there are indie games that could be made on the budget that it takes to modernize one champion in League of Legends, but just my anti-capitalist little soul being like, no, the money goes to the executives and the shareholders. That's where they put way too much of it. That's why they fired 600 people this year.
We can only hope that they're paying all of these people enough for their hard work and that they're not firing the people who are working on projects like this one to make room for other, less substantial changes to the game. As an independent artist without a large team of talented peers to support my work, this is the best that I can do for now. It's a glimpse at yet another possible route that League of Legends could take with their official Shyvana VGU, but I'll let you all decide if it's the direction that you're hoping Shyvana will go. I know some of you have different expectations for a Shyvana VGU, and I'm not here to say anyone's vision of Shyvana is more valid than anyone else's.
I am. I will say that. I'll do that. I will say that. If you want Shyvana, you out there. If you want Shyvana to be like a fucking skinny ass generic, like the curvy fantasy babe with a fucking dime piece ass or whatever, you're losers and you're wrong. You're cowards. You're bad. You're bad people with poor moral character. I don't actually mean that. No, you're not. You're allowed to like the things that you like, but also that's a complete fucking waste of Shyvana as a character. Subjectively, has always been on the train of like Shyvana being like 12 foot of just like muscle and sinew and like built like a brick shithouse, right? I'm on that train as well. I think that's where her design naturally leads. There are definitely skinny versions of Shyvana that you could do where you play with the idea that in her human form she actually looks kind of like not that powerful, and then she goes dragon mode and that's like when she really fucking beefs up. You can do it the other way, have her be really fucking buff and powerful in her human form but then sleek and agile in the dragon form. There's other things you can do there. There's other ideas that are possible, but like if you look at the concept, the lore, the idea of like a half dragon, half human feral child who's essentially lived in the wild for most of her life, had to fend for herself, had to kill her own mother in single combat just for the right to even live, and who's now like haunted by this like bigoted society that wants her dead. And you go, well, but it's important to me that her design is traditionally attractive. Sorry, you have something wrong with your brain. You're bad at storytelling. That's bad storytelling. That's a bad job at that. She can still be hot. She can still be attractive. That's not really the issue. It's not the issue of whether she can be attractive. Is the issue of whether or not that attractiveness has to fall into like that mode of total conventionality, like she's a fucking Genshin Impact character, right? Because, like, again, if you wanted to do traditionally attractive Shyvana, there is a path to do that from the narrative perspective, which is Shyvana trying really, really, really hard to fit into conventional Demacian society while she's sort of trying to be with Jarvan and be a part of his court, right? Like, there you could have the idea of, okay, here she's, like, doing makeup, she's trying to slim herself down a little bit, trying to, like, let her muscles go a little bit more soft so she's not as intimidating and powerful and scary. Like, yes, from that perspective, you could do that. Like a version of Shyvana who's still trying to assimilate into Demacian society by looking as conventional as possible. Sure. Like, that's not an impossible character design thing to justify. Just that, why would you want that for the champion version of her? Right? Like, that's a version of her that it could exist at some point in time in her narrative. But why would you want that for the champion version of her? Right? Like the version that's supposed to be the powerful fantasy that you play her as, right? That, no, bad. I will not accept that. Riot, if you make Shyvana conventionally fucking attractive, I am coming to your offices and I'm throwing rocks at all the windows. I'm just saying.
We all have different tastes, different preferences, and I can assure you, with more certainty than I have in my own mortality, that no matter what the official VGU looks like, some people are going to be happy, and some people are not. Let me
I'm gonna be both of those people.
know in the comments of this video if the work that I've done for you all today is in line with something that you'd hope to see for the official Shyvana VGU, or if you're hoping they'll take it in another direction. That's all for now, folks.
Yeah, good question. Because, like, I like the direction here. Like, I like the idea of her as, like, specifically posing her as an enemy of Jarvan now, right? Like a jilted former lover, as it were, but also someone who has been horrifically abused by the Demacian system and who's like now going like, okay, like if you insist on conceptualizing me as a monster, then here you fucking go, motherfuckers. Deal with me now. I like that. Like I like leaning into like the anger, the fury, because that's one of her gameplay mechanics is fury, rage, right? I like that. I like this as a potential direction. There are some things about the costuming, like the chains we talked about. There are a few things about the way it's put together that I'm like, again, the face. I really liked the face that Subjectively did on their older rework of Shyvana. The one that had like a very distinctive sort of, I think it's here.
Years ago, and
Yeah, maybe not that one. I think that was a little too old, but that one. Because like Shyvana, I think should be young specifically. Like, I think that's part of her character is that she's a very young dragon, right? Like, she's a very young person who's still trying to find herself, discover herself, figure out who she is in the world. This, to me, looks a little too old for that. That could be, like, a later-in-life version of her. But, like, this version of her that has this very, very distinctive like noticeable, powerful face that you kind of can't ignore. I like that. I think the version we've got here. Let me see if I can find that face is a little bit too indistinct, right? It could also just be an artifact of how much time was spent rendering it, but like this feels too flat. This feels like it doesn't quite have enough power and personality, especially if she's supposed to be like a specifically wild version of Shyvana. Like I would like her to have a very distinctive, very powerful, unignorable face. Again, because Demacia is all about conformity, right? Like Demacia is all about not standing out from the crowd, not being too different. I think Shyvana, like, even if you do a version of her where she's trying to fit in, I think she should fail. Like, I think she should still stand out and be noticeably, visibly different than other Demacians, and giving her a very distinctive face is a good way to do that, right? Like, something that, no matter what kind of makeup or what kind of clothes she wears, she kind of just can't deal with, and Demacians will insist on seeing her as an other because of it, right? Like a physical feature that you have to accept that as a part about her. You can't demand that she change that just to fit in. Unlike clothes, which are like something you can change about yourself. Some kind of physical feature that's like, and like she has that with the purple skin, obviously, or it's not that she doesn't have those features, just like faces are very, very important for character design in that way. Like they're very central, especially eyes, to how people relate to each other, how people see each other. And I think giving Shyvana a very strong, very powerful, very distinctive face, like with a powerful nose bridge, or just a big, like just a big chunky nose in general that sort of approximates the shape of like a dragon's jaw or something like that. That's a good way to give her that powerful personality that cannot be suppressed by Demacian society. But as a general thing here, like, I wouldn't mind if Shyvana was a little bit sexualized. I wouldn't mind if she had, like, the titties out or, like, did some thigh action. Like, she already fucking is in, like her base splash, right? Like, we have this slim, thick bullshit going on with the thigh gap. She should not have a thigh gap, by the way. If you want to make her a muscle mommy, make her an actual muscle mommy, where, like, you've trained those leg muscles so much that they don't fucking leave a thigh gap there with, like, what the fuck are you doing? Why are you doing that? Actual fucking abs and not just painted on scales that approximate the shape of abs, right? Like, make her actually fucking muscular, bulky, big in a way that takes up a lot of space and not just in a way that's nice and curvy and round, right? You can still sexualize her, but sexualize her within the bounds of the power fantasy instead of like, you have this power fantasy of like, I'm wild, I'm feral, I'm a dragon, I kill people, but then also I am a gym babe who takes very special care to sculpt my body in a way that's like sleek and rounded and conventionally attractive. Like, these two things conflict with each other rather than support one another, right? Whereas being big, and especially as like a female character, as a feminine character, being big, hard, sculpted, muscular, powerful, physically imposing and intimidating, that is something which is non-conventional, right? Like, that's something that stands out from what a woman, large air quotes, is, again, large air quotes, supposed to be culturally speaking. That's a way to make her other, a way to make her different, especially from a character like Tiana Crownguard, right? Like, who's like the fucking blonde Republican of the Demacian power structure, right? Like, someone who does fit very conventionally into like these hyper feminine ideas of like what exactly a woman is supposed to look like in a conservative sort of reactionary society. How did I get to this point? Right. Just, you can definitely sexualize it, but the sexualization has to happen in alignment with what the power fantasy is, right? Where it's completely, you can definitely like have a sexual fantasy where you also are huge and muscular and powerful. These two things are not contradictory to each other, right? It's just, you have to be sexualized in a different way in the character design to achieve that, rather than sexualizing along the conventional lines, which is all softness, smoothness, like rounded curvaceousness and like skinniness and things like that. If anything, I would kind of like to see her have a stronger core here. Like, I think like the hip pieces here do a lot of work to sort of emphasize an hourglass shape, to widen her hips and give her that like narrow waist, broad shoulders, broad hips that gives like the very strong hourglass shape. I think giving her an even stronger core, like literally not making her curvy in her body, but allowing the armor pieces and the costuming to add to the curviness over top of the actual body, I think could do a good job of that, while still emphasizing that Shyvana's body itself, her body as it is primarily about strength and power. It's primarily about being this tense, like, knot of muscle that's just waiting to unleash and explode. But yeah, no, this fucking rules. This is great. Like I always look forward to Subjectively's reworks of any champion, any of them, because like they are always in many ways better than the standard. Again, look up their fucking Zyra redesign and tell me that wouldn't be 100 million times more badass than knockoff Spirit Halloween fucking Poison Ivy that we have in the game right now. Tell me. You can't tell me. It rules so much fucking harder. So yeah, I'm fucking into this. I'm into every version of Shyvana that Subjectively has presented. I do think this one is the best one though. Like I think this is the best one they've come up with. It's the one that takes a bigger swing with the character. It's the one that has the more interesting dragon form. Again, maybe a longer nose to sort of like, instead of curling it in on itself like a clenched fist, maybe it has a little bit more flow forwards. But like, this is also the most interesting dragon version of Shyvana, right? Like, this is the most fascinating version. And these things could be like her folded wings. Probably that's what they're supposed to be. Like the wings folded up, and then she can like unfurl them when she needs to fly. Yeah, I like the wolf-like, lion-like, at least in my read of the character. I like that. I would like more of a lion version of her than a wolf, actually. I kind of dig the idea of having a sort of lion aspect to it. Although maybe that would align her a little bit too much with the idea of an Eastern dragon, where Shyvana is very specifically supposed to be like a Western fantasy-inspired dragon thing. I don't know. Maybe. Yeah, no, this ruled. This was great. I really like this. Like, the VGU is going to be a lot more conservative than this, because it has to be. Like, that's sort of where Riot is at as a company right now, is their VGUs have a tendency to roll pretty fucking conservatively. One of the things I should say, Shyvana in her base model also, she's so fucking skinny. It has annoyed me forever. She's so fucking skinny, right? Like, this is, what do you mean this is the shape of like a wild, feral mountain woman who's like fended for herself? Yeah, sure that is. It's so annoying. It's so skinny, and the dragon form is not much better. Like, the dragon form in League of Legends is genuinely kind of hideous. Very much a product of the limitations of its time, right? But it's one of those things, like, if Shyvana herself was very beefy and big and like chunky, and then having a dragon form that's very lean and sort of very sleek and slim, like a slim little lizard, that could be an interesting point of storytelling. That contrast could be an interesting point of storytelling, of contrast between the two versions of her, the two forms, how they relate to the world and things like that. Sure, absolutely. But this awkward thing, this skinny ass bat figure thing, creature, whatever the hell this looks horrible. It really does. It's really not very good. Like, the idle animation is probably also the worst of it. It does look better when it's in motion as a dragon. Like, it has a little bit, there's more of an animalistic aspect to it. Like, it makes a little bit more sense. But like, God, the one thing, this is another thing I appreciate about the Subjectively version, they don't make her dragon form humanoid. That's one of the big failures of this one. They're trying to show that she's half human, half dragon by having her stand on her hind legs and like hold her arms out to the sides in a way almost as though to suggest a semi-human posture. And they shouldn't. Like, this version of her looks way better when it's running like an animal. And it looks absolutely its worst when it's trying to emote like a human, like in the laugh. Or does it have a dance animation? I think it doesn't. It doesn't have a dance animation, really? Fucking hell. Like, when it's trying to emote like a human, that's when it looks absolutely the worst. And it also, again, it undercuts the idea that when she's transformed, she is something other than human, right? Like that, yeah. So, definitely, like, the fucking wolf version of Shyvana that's presented for the dragon form for this one, huge step up, like way more interesting visually. There are some things here that I feel there are elements of her human character that could be incorporated into it a little bit more, maybe. Like, it's a question of whether, because like this Shyvana human form, right, this is when she's most aligned with her dragon self. That's the concept of the story at this point, is that this is Shyvana fully in touch with her dragon side, right? Like and unleashing her dragon side through her human form also, right? And, like, again, that stubbiness that we have in the wolf form here, where it sort of curls in on itself like that, like a clenched fist, that's not really an evidence in the shape language of the human form that much, I don't think. Like, there really isn't that same sort of, like, clenched fist roundedness to the human form, and I'm kind of missing that, which, again, is where, like, maybe some reconsideration of the exact shape of the mane or the head to more closely match the flow of her human form a little bit. I don't know exactly how you would do that. Again, subjectively is a much better illustrator than I am, but that would be my feedback if I was like giving feedback from a perspective of like what are the things you can see that might be good if they were changed in some way. Still, this fucking ruled. This is fucking fantastic. Go follow Subjectively, by the way. Go watch their other Shyvana rework videos, first of all, and also the Champion videos, because they are good. Like, these are interesting exercises artistically and that like force you to sort of think about League of Legends champions from a perspective of ignoring, like, League of Legends champions don't have to be the way they are just because that's how they've always been. They can be something very different. You can just radically change them because you are not under the same constraints that Riot is. You have the power to do that. And it doesn't matter if you can't live up to the technical quality of Riot's art. What you can do is still something that's interesting and valuable and worth examining, I think, is my conclusion to this. So thanks for watching. Bye.